Hi, I'm Emily Roger, host of the Boiling Point podcast. My co-host, Dave Vale, and I will bring you thoughtful discussions with leaders who are positively impacting our world. This is The Boiling Point, where leadership and inspiration meet. Hi, Dave. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm thinking about our last conversation with Kelly Russell DeVarnay. Is that pronouncing her last name correctly?
Yes.
And connection. And we never got into it, but you went to and actually this will tie into the next conversation with the guest that's going to come on here, Dr. Bill Howatt. But what was it like, this workshop that you went, and it was really focusing on, I guess, deepening connections? Is that what I understood it to be?
Yeah, it was. And it was a group of, how many people? How many was there of us? 10. And even the thing too around, and Kelly talked about this, and you and I know this around this, like the importance of fostering relationships. And it's one thing to kind of have, like, how do we, like, what's that kind of deeper thing in how the connections can be formed? And what I really noticed within that workshop was that was however many of us, 8, 10 strangers brought in. Nobody really knew one another. And how it's that like kind of warm up period when, as you kind of create more of those relationships, get to know each other a little bit more, feel a little more safer around people, that the conversations were able to go deep fast.
Oh, wow.
But if that kind of safety and if those relationships hadn't been established, I don't think we would have been able to connect as well as we all did. And that was a lot of the feedback that I definitely heard from some of the other participants as well.
Well, it was a great conversation. And I think the conversation we're going to have today kind of ties right into it. And I have this great connection to our guest, Bill Howatt. And he's someone I met, probably a decade ago. We've done work together. We collaborated. He and I were co-hosts on this podcast. He's been a guest a few times. And I'm going to get you to do the intro for him.
Yes, Dr. Bill Howatt is no stranger to the Boiling Point. He is an expert on workplace mental health and has worked in the mental health and psychological safety for over 30 years and has struggled with and succeeded with his mental health problems as well. Dr. Bill has a very open, honest, and effective approach to mental health, offering effectively tailored and commonly missed solutions to workplace mental health problems. He has written 3 books on taking control of mental health, getting out of psychological ruts, and being present for growth to help readers grasp these concepts in greater depth. Dr. Bill, welcome back. Oh my gosh, we just can't get enough of you.
Can you pass that on to my children?
We will. One of the things I really enjoy about you, Bill, is and we touched on it, Emily touched on in the intro, is your openness and willing to be vulnerable about the challenges you've been up against, which we all have lived with. But that was, we're talking about connection earlier. That was a point of connection for us early on. Is you're just very open about sharing. Here's what I've been struggling with. Here's what I've been going through. Here's what I'm learning. Here's why I have an interest in this field. For the listeners that haven't heard you talk or speak on these topics before, what are some of the things that you've been grappling with and dealing with over the years? Like what have your challenges been?
Thanks. Well, welcome to you two. Listening to you guys, it sounds like you have a lot of fun in this show. One of the things, I guess, David, to start this conversation off on is that I'm trying to actually get to the point where I can articulate this and be a little bit more clear and simpler. I'm becoming more of a steward and mindful of a concept called neurodivergence. And it's for me, in the last few years, I've been learning actually about what this concept means in regards to empowerment and in regards to removing some shame and opening up some barriers and starting to normalize. For me, from the time I failed grade 2, because I've auditory visual dyslexia and ADHD, I'd be spending my entire life trying to figure out how to fit in. how to be good enough, how to do enough. I mean, how to get enough education so I could feel I was smart enough to fit in, how I could write enough stuff to try to figure out how to have a point of view. And what I'm starting to become mindful more is that the importance for us all to kind of take a pause and step back and start to really stop falling for all this buzzwords in regards to this whole conversation around inclusion, diversity, equity, accommodation. And what I mean by buzzwords is that a lot of folks are just putting lip service to this. And they may not be sitting in it and trying to actually understand what any of this means. In the realm that I start with, and I guess it's somehow because I've, whether being thick-skinned or slow or whatever it may be, is I've been pretty good at advocating for myself. And I think that's one of the challenges that folks that have any type of disability is feeling comfortable and confident enough to self-advocate. So I've spent a lot of time, David, to be quite candidly, talking about mental health and talking about these different issues. But right now I'm starting to really spend time to slow it down and say, okay, what does mental health really mean in the context in the workplace? What does inclusion really mean in the workplace? What does, in regards to diversity, what are all the different subcategories that fall under that need consideration if they have different experiences? What is an adversity load? What is neurodivergence? What is a marginalized employee really mean? Because we hear these things, we may not actually have enough understanding to actually have empathy. So that's kind of a nutshell. I mean, using myself, my own experience, and my reading, try to engage in this conversation with folks. And it's to pass it back to you for the conversation, David. I think the most important thing to me, that the more I've learned about it, is how disappointed I am that I don't know what I know now 20 years ago. The amount of relationships that I've probably blown up, the amount of challenges I've created, trying just to be a human being and try to process what's happening in real time, but getting overwhelmed and not actually realizing that, there's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with them. The challenges has been the barrier of how to give space to be able to know how to communicate with each other. It doesn't have to be win or lose. And I've spent a lot of my life on win and lose.
I love that you share that story about grade 2. And, it reminds me of, for myself, of a story that I go back to. And I speak a lot about this when I do public speaking, is around my experience in grade 2 public speaking. And the story is that I recite the alphabet. My teacher asked me in grade 2 to get up and recite the alphabet. And so I get up and I'm like, poof, I've got this. And I was a very, very, very shy kid. And as I recite the alphabet, I finish the alphabet in the way that I thought it was, which was Y, N, Z. And so I thought that there were 2 N's in the alphabet, because you know how they say it like W, like Y and Z. And so my teacher asked me to recite it again. And I recited again, like so confidently, like knowing like I am nailing the second N that a lot of kids don't even know about. And the entire class started laughing. And it was in that moment that I was like, I am never speaking again in a public setting in front of a group. Like that moment crushed me. And so even with that, for you, why is that story for you of being in grade 2 so important and important to kind of reflect back on today?
Yeah, it was the first time I really acknowledged that I was different than everyone else. I mean, I was adopted. I lived in a foster home early days, but that wasn't really such a big deal to me, because it was just kind of, I was safe. I went from a place where I wasn't safe to a place where I was safe. So that was okay. So, grade 1 was pretty cool. It was fun. A great grade 1 teacher, lots of playing. And not that I can remember a lot of it. This is recollection with my stories with my mother. The grade 2 was really where I had my first awakening, if you will, that I wasn't the same as every other duck, and that everyone else was going ahead and I was staying back. And that was where my quest to, try to prove that you're good enough, and where you start to get kind of caught in that script. And that is really a significant emotional event, because you're losing your social connections and you're actually being rejected. and it actually traumatized. So today when we talk about trauma, that's a form of trauma. Now, some folks could belittle it, but trauma is any significant emotional event outside the realm of normal. So if your peer group is taken away from you and you actually don't feel that you're valued or good enough, and you don't understand why, it can be traumatizing to you. And trauma is a form of anxiety. So it's based on what's called attachment theory, where you're brought up, and I have definitely, as a kid being adopted, would have had attachment issues about worried about losing, because losing a parent or losing something or being good enough. That starts it unconsciously, and then you get hit at grade 2, and then the whole process you kind of go through. And if I look at it, as I look at the motif of my life, I mean, I really don't take myself that serious. I think some people might think I do, but I really don't take myself that serious. And I think I've been trying to spend a lot of energy to be taken serious.
Mm.
So it's an interesting juxtaposition. I mean, I don't drive a Jag or a Porsche. I probably could afford it. I don't wear a Rolex. I probably could afford it. I don't live in a $2 million house. I probably could afford it. I've never really been taken by stuff. I've been more taken by just trying to figure out how to feel calm. And that's been a long quest. Getting closer, not there yet, but it's getting closer.
Do you, the work you do in helping people on their own journeys, in organizations,
Yeah.
I guess what is, and every time we talk to you, there's almost seems like there's kind of new learning for you, right? And like you're, and you maybe new understanding, and then it feels to me like, Bill, what you do is you then tie your work to that, and it's almost like to get a better understanding. Like there's just kind of these new levels of awareness that come in terms of what people are struggling with and what a pandemic brings, and what does it mean to be a leader? What does it mean to be inclusive? What does psychological safety mean? All these sorts of things. So for you, like what's bubbling up for you right now, Bill?
I think it's really putting more focus back into the human. I think Emily said something fascinating. I was listening tentatively. I've written, thought a lot around isolation, loneliness, about relationships. What I'm spending a lot of time right now is here's what's really happening in the workforce. The workforce has evolved. If we talk about the future of work, is that folks are going to be more transient. They'll come and go. So I'm paused and just follow this thread for a minute. 30 years ago, it would be highly probable if I went and I joined it, whether it's a government, a factory, a dental practice, I probably would stay there for 15, 20, perhaps 30 years. It'd be 80 to 90% of people would stay in one place. What happens with that? Well, I get a sense of security. I get to know my clients. I get to know my customers. I get to know my space. I get to know my colleagues. We'll have drama and dynamics, but there's a certain amount of stability. But in this world now that I'm starting to realize it's much more high volatility. There's much more turnover. We've rethought about how we organize work. Some folks are working remote. Some folks are moving in. So the casual interactions and how people build in relationships has changed. And so what I'm starting to realize is that for all this to work in the workplace, the thing that we don't spend probably enough time talking about is a thing called tacit knowledge. And tacit knowledge is really the gold every employer needs to survive. Explicit knowledge is the stuff you write in a book or things you're written down, policies. Tacit knowledge are the things that you learn through experience and the things you share and feel comfortable talking to each other. So now as we start to think about all the different functions and roles and businesses, I'm starting to notice that business life cycles are starting to shorten. There's not a whole lot of companies being around for 100 years. Companies now, life cycles are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. There's more volatility. There's more pressure for finance. There's more pressure to acquire. So the brand of an organization is important, but the loyalty to the brand may not be the same. It's kind of like the old Pepsi analogy. Like Pepsi had a 90% brand loyalty at one time, meaning if you walked into the store and there wasn't Pepsi, you wouldn't buy it. But today there's not as much brand loyalty. You might go, well, you might look for what's the most cheapest or economic. So what I'm really focusing on with all this, David, is how do we put more human into a workplace, and how do we connect the dots? And I focus a lot on what's called psychological health and safety, inclusion, the employee experience. What does that really mean in a very simple? And we can get into all the different hows if you want. It's basically very easy. The percent of times employees are spending in positive emotions versus unpleasant emotions. Every interaction in the workplace is an opportunity to create a positive, unpleasant emotion. Positivity, toxicity is not what I'm talking about. The other part is unpleasant emotions are very important. You need them. So how are we helping employees deal with conflict? For example, my dear friend, Dr. Mabusker, and I are releasing a model on how to help organizations deal with conflict, because conflict's important, it's healthy. But in our society, if we're going to want to try to get people to have more positive emotions versus unpleasant emotions, we have to actually understand unpleasant emotions might be where the best ideas happen. New learning can happen, but we need to feel comfortable to deal with it. So to go back to what Emily said, if we as leaders can't develop relationships, or employees can't develop relationships, I'll talk about to you what I'm calling my trusted leadership process in a minute, is at the end of the day, if we're going to succeed, employees who trust each other are more likely to share, more likely to want to help, more likely to be able to coach each other. But that's going to require more energy, because if you're turning over more people, that's not often in many people's job description, the importance of training other people. You know, you're used to train one every 5 years, now one a month. That's getting tiresome for people. So that whole human piece, I'm convinced how people feel right now. Employers that take, and I'm working with a couple of very large employers right now, and the CEOs get it. The employees' charge and how they feel matters for their long-term success. And that's really where I'm focused right now, trying to simplify it, David, to try to get to emotions and how the environment can play an important role. So there's all kinds of tactics we can talk about. But unless we start to create the habits, create space for being able to be vulnerable and learn and grow and move away from this thing that I'm going to have to be always right or perfect, which is hard for some people.
You were tacit knowledge? Is that what, like TASSIN?
TACIT, tacit knowledge. So in the world of TACIT, tacit.
Okay, tacit knowledge.
Yeah. So in the world of knowledge management, 80% of your institutional intelligence walks out of the organization every day, and you hope it comes back the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So most organizations I walk into, and David's seen me before, it doesn't take me very long to figure out what the critical talent is. If you lose 5 or 6 or 7 of those really critical people walk out the door at the same time, your business could be at risk. And so at the end of the day, businesses are very highly dependent. Many businesses are highly dependent on human relationships and human knowledge. And that's really what I'm starting to see that employers need to get really good at. And this is why inclusion's like driving fear out, dealing with conflict. We'll talk a little bit about what I'm thinking about coaching. I'm starting to see it as a mission critical for leaders because of the volatility and how people are learning now. So there's all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, Emily, it's all about, to answer the question, it's really how do we help improve more interactions, even when I'm feeling unwell, how to show up and be well in the workplace. And
then you mentioned, Dave, I feel like you were just about to say something.
No, go for it.
You mentioned the habits.
Yeah.
And so habits within the workplace or individual habits, or what were you referencing in that?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking. I'm a big proponent, Emily, that we often with employees, especially in workplace mental health, we'll send them off to a course that should fix them, or we'll send leaders to a workshop that'll fix them. We'll send out a new policy, do this, or we'll send the information without following through and correcting for the forgetting curve or teaching people how to learn. And so what basically what I'm trying to say, Emily, is that we do lots of communications, lots of knowledge transfer, lots of development and workshop, employment and work in the workforce or by employers. But we may not be doing enough is making a clear distinction between the information we want to share and the so what, and what are the key performance behaviors, the habits we want to develop. So let's use a real example. So if I was a manager and David was my direct report, for example, and I had a command and control approach, and I was really, really directive, and I'm a finger pointer, okay, and in my body language, I'm not aware that 90% of all my communication, paraverbals, kinesthetics impact the employee experience or David. So my body language is intense. So you're my coach, and you say to me, "Hey, Bill, if you stop pointing at David, come with him, like you're just lost something, and your nonverbals and your approach was a little bit more, compassionate. You might lower David's anxiety so he feels more comfortable. So he gave me that information. Well, that and 25 cents won't get you a cup of coffee because we're so busy. We have a part of our brain called the default neural network that human beings' attention span is less than 9 seconds. Many folks, that's a goldfish is 9 seconds. So many of us are actually impacted by information, but we don't have enough time. So habits means, Emily, it moves from here into my unconscious brain, where I learn, oh, there's David. And I learn my willpower is don't point, don't point, don't point. And I'm having metacognitions with myself. But when it becomes habitual, I'm engaging David with courtesy and respect. I'm not pointing. Now, how long that will take on average will be about 66 days based on, James Clear research or other folks, or up to 260 days. So the big miss in many organizations is they have great intentions, but they forget information is useless unless it becomes habitual. So we can say that we want to have a caring workforce. We can say we want to have values. We can say we want to be inclusive. We can say we can be psychological safe. We can spend millions of dollars on training people. But if we're not following through and being crystal clear and measuring what are the behaviors that we want and providing feedback, sadly, not much improves.
Well, and you know what? It's been interesting. You and I have been going back and forth over the last few months, and it seems to me, Bill, that it's not like new, but there's maybe you're seeing the opportunity, and this your ears are perked up at this, Emily, but just really leveraging coaching in an organization as a way to support learning and development. And it feels to me like, you just, rather than just throwing training at a, kind of a challenge. Mm-hmm. So what, if anything, has changed about that for you, or what are you noticing now that might be different, and what, how is coaching showing up now in a way that maybe it didn't before?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me, David, is I think I was, really hyper-focused on content. And I think training, I was really focused on content. And not that training's not important. I think what I like now, the more I'm thinking about coaching, is the following. If I want folks to move from a command and control to a trusted leader, and I educate them on what I call the trusted leader bundle, I'll make sure you have it and you can give it to your youth, all your audience. It's a free tool I've created. And if we have folks understand, what are the foundational behaviors? What are those 5 foundational behaviors that create a a trusted experience? What are the daily behaviors? What are the on-demand behaviors? When is the time to be a collaborator or to make a decision, or emotional regulation, or just because I listen doesn't mean I'm going to agree? Like teaching very specific leadership behaviors. Where I see the coaching does three things. One, it's built in accountability model. And what I mean by accountability, it's like yourself, being someone who's trained in coaching, one of the things is helping people discover their own potential. Well, one of the things is simply asking the question, did you do what you said? And what happens is many of us live in our heads. So the first thing is coaching helps people create the habit of getting out of their head. And from a behavioral economics perspective, most human beings live healthier in the future. And let me help you understand what I mean by this. Yeah, listen, I get this being nice to my employees or building rapport, but today I got to get some results done. I'll go do that tomorrow. Yeah, I know eating healthy is important, but today I'm a bit stressed. I'll have the pizza today. Tomorrow will be green salad. Listen, I know I need to get in better shape, but Christmas is coming, lots of social, but in January I'll be on the treadmill. So we have lots of good intention about what we're going to do. Coaching helps us bring it to the now and helps us be accountable with those behaviors to achieve what goal we want to be. So, for example, if I go to you as my coach, Dave, and say, I feel a little bit overwhelmed. Good coach goes, cool. What's going on? That's it. And the person goes, well, I think of this and that. Okay, that's interesting. What have you tried? Well, what do you think? I don't get paid to think. I get paid to ask questions. So what do you think? And at the point you move the person through a conversation where they realize there is no magic solution. I actually need to do something. And what lots of human beings need, coaching helps them, number two, is to realize there is no shortcut. We have one thing we can deal with as ourselves. And how I'm using it right now and promoting it to my clients is that there is so much happening. To be a leader right now is only becoming more complicated. And as you become a leader, creating space for the number three is the third part. It's the conversations that happen in coaching. They can be skill development conversations. They actually can be problem-solving conversations. Or they can be inquiry conversations of why am I doing what I'm doing? What's keeping me going? And what's filling my pump? And is this what I want? And if we can help people in leadership be able to start to get in touch, because for the work I want to do to put human into it, 70% of the employee experience is going to be impacted by the manager-employee relationship. Becoming a leader in a world with inclusions, many folks don't even know what it means yet, neurodivergence, the changes in the law around the accountability and leaders. You look what's happening in the province of Nova Scotia, for example, September this year. In the province of Nova Scotia this year, in September this year, workers' comp is going to be moved towards what's called gradual stress onset. What does that mean? Well, someone in the workplace who's being harassed or bullied, frequency, duration, intensity, they could qualify for a workers' comp claim. Well, you think in the amount of stress and the amount of fear in the average workplace today, and how many people don't feel comfortable raising their hand. And so what's happening is a lot of people don't raise their hand, they're leaving. They're going quitting, they're going on sick time, or they're going on disability. The time, David, of having leaders who are able to actually enter a really complicated space to be able to help people, my sense is I don't think there's a course on the planet Earth that will have all the answers for a leader. I think coaching provides leaders on a weekly basis to be focused on what behaviors I'm trying to improve. Why the heck am I keeping doing what I'm doing and what's filling my tank? And to be, dealing with those ad hoc challenges and problems that come up inevitably as a leader. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is why Dr. Bill Howatt comes on the Boiling Point podcast time and time again. So brilliant. Yeah, this thing around habits too. And that has me thinking about team building and team building exercises and team building activities. And maybe there needs to be just more team building habits established. And what are our current habits, and taking that time to actually, on an individual basis, be able to get to know what our habits are, but then even our habits in interacting with one another.
Yeah, funny you say that. I did an analysis, and right now in my website too, I'll send it to you too. It's a free tool we created with employers that I give 7 habits that peers can do with each other to support. And a part of the challenge is that the things that drains and charges employees' batteries is their manager-employee relationship, but also the peer-to-peer. The concept around team building is it's a fascinating construct. And before I can actually develop a relationship with someone else, I need to develop a relationship with myself. We don't talk about that in team building enough. We also don't calibrate the difference between introverts and extroverts, or cultural differences, or generational differences that are often is a bit of a misnomer. I find that some of the most dynamic teams I was with one the other day, they had 80-year-olds all the way to 20-year-olds, and it was the most creative team. It was amazing watching how they were working together. They all want the same thing. They all want to feel valuable. They all want to feel that what their contribution matters. So they feel valuable, their contribution matters, and they feel safe and welcomed and belong, etc. So watching how all these dynamics work, but the thing that I'm watching, Emily, is that a lot of teams fail is because of constituents on the teams have never developed the micro skills to be able to learn how to interact. So I, for example, have a low emotional literacy. And because of if I don't understand what a trauma-informed lens is, and under stress, that activates my fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, and I get into emotional dysregulation, and you're calm, there's a chance that some of my learned behaviors could push you away and not bring you in. And so what happens is we're human beings, we learn very fast. Like you burn your hand on a stove once, you don't usually go back. So if I'm a negative, you kind of anchor, well, that Bill guy, he's a load. He's complicated to deal with. And so what happens is we start to judge people versus their behavior. If that makes sense. So team building, in my humble opinion, starts by providing people with foundational behaviors. And the big one is learning how to take accountability for your own behavior, regulating your own behavior. So if I can actually get a toolkit to manage myself, my interpersonal skills a little bit, then I can come and start building relationships and learn how to do that. But here's the thing that we miss in team building, Emily. 0 being low, 10 being high. The average Canadian or anybody around the world, in my opinion, from all the research I've done, is not 10 out of 10. It's usually around 5 out of 10. 5s don't want to be 4s. So what happens is there's a fear of being good enough or failure. So unconsciously, the only thing that when people feel a threat, their ego goes. So they react. So there's a lot of reactivity in workplaces because individuals may never have been taught the skills how to deal with some adversity without reacting to it. And then that kind of, you'll see like the Hatfield and McCoys, like you interact with me once and, well, that Emily person, you can't talk to her. And then I go tell David all the bad things about Emily. And there's a high probability you don't even know I'm upset by times too, right?
Yeah.
So that it's getting those foundational behaviors for employees, getting leadership behaviors, but more to go back to what David said too, team building's a tactic, coaching's a tactic, leadership development, 1 day, half day, 3 day, that's a tactic, mental fitness, that's a tactic. We have all these different tactics. They're all on their own valuable. However, the real question from a plan, do, check, act is us in leadership positions asking, what's the so what? Meaning, what's success look like? How are we going to measure it? And what habits really are you looking for? So what does a great leader look like? And because you have the competency skill, but what do you really want a great leader to look like? And for example, you'll often hear, I want a great leader who's a good communicator. Well, lots of leaders think communications might be just telling people what they know.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask you about the, like, speaking on leaders, the trusted leadership process you're talking about. Like so what's going on there? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, the trusted leader is a framework, David. It's a user-friendly tool that we've created. Lots of my clients are now using it, and they're having great success with it, by the way. We just met with we're seeing folks that their engagement scores year over year move by 10, 12, 14 points.
Really?
So what I'm learning is that by sitting down, and we do the following. Here's what a trusted leader bundle would look like, for example. The trusted leader bundle would look like, okay, we introduce the team to it in about 60 minutes. They get a little card, which you'll be able to see on my website. It's a little illustrator what the program is, a little reading. They get to evaluate where they are as a command and control to a trusted leader. And then what they do is that we introduce and we say to them, hey, David, and it goes like this. So David, if you were my direct report, there's a high probability, for example, this is an example of a behavior, that I would need to give you feedback. Would that be reasonable to you? And you'd probably say, yes. Okay, great. So as a leader who has to give you feedback, that's reasonable, how would you like me to give you feedback? And you might say, well, any way you want, Bill. And I'll go, no, that's not what I asked. How would you like me to give you feedback? So some of your workers who are neurodivergent, meaning they get stressed, overwhelmed by information, you might find that those folks are better off if you give them some bullets in writing. Then once I learn how you want to give feedback, this is where you flip the script as a psychological safe leader. Then I say, Dave, let's talk about how you're going to give me feedback. And David goes, well, why would I do that? Well, because we have a role to protect each other. So how are you going to give me feedback? Let's talk about that. Okay. And then I said, David, is it possible that you and I might have to debate some points? Yeah. Okay. If we really care, do you think we're going to agree all the time? No. I hope not, because you wouldn't be very much use to me if you agreed with me all the time. So how are we going to debate? And you might go, I don't know. So let's talk about it. How do I pick a debate with you? Well, let's talk about how you pick a debate with me. Then we talk about correcting. Correcting is different than feedback. Feedback's about something that's optional. You have correcting is no, it's not optional. If you're hurting someone, like implicit bias, you're causing someone's problem, or you're breaking rules, or whatever it may be. How do you celebrate? If you're an introvert, you may not want to be acknowledged in front of an entire group. So we put in what are called the foundational behaviors and a habit where we practice it. And the role of a manager and employee in groups where the span of control is not too big and they have a leadership like 8, 10 direct reports at a maximum, it's easier to do. And to make sure that they develop these 5 foundational behaviors and they practice them. And they always are talking about them. And then they practice their daily behaviors. And then they have their on-demand behaviors. And every Friday, they meet up with what's called an accountability partner. And each week they talk about what they learned, what they're going to get better at next week. And what's fascinating about it is power of intention.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like coaching. It's accountability, power of attention. What you focus on, you'll get to. Keeps on focusing and focusing and focusing, helping them be moving out that, the uncomfortable zone a little bit, challenging themselves to do a little bit more. And we do that over and over and over. And when do we stop? We never do. Is the idea of the program, it continues. because there is never a time where you go, I'm a master of everything. You'll need to do this with every employee you work with is a new pad of paper to work with, right? And here's the thing about being a trusted leader. I got offered the other day, David, for a global role. Actually, in the last 2 months, I don't know what's going on. I got offered 2 global roles. And one was in New York and one was in Chicago. Big organizations. And they want me to take on, one wants me to be the chief mental health officer. The other wanted me to take over the CHR role. And I said, no. He said, why? I said, because I've realized something. Here's the key. I've been fighting it for a few years, but I'm saying it. To be a leader, you need to have energy for people.
Mm-hmm.
And I like people, but I've come to the conclusion I don't have as much energy for the unexpected as I used to. And to be a leader, employees can be inconvenient. They're human beings. They have opinions and they have needs and etc. And they don't fall on the clock. If you want to lead and be successful, at a core, you need to enjoy people. And 2, you need to have the energy. If you don't have the energy, then what will happen is you'll be short, grumpy, and you're not going to get the best out of yourself or other people. So I said no. Maybe I'll come around later. I don't know.
What I like
Yeah, I
about,
feel like that's so.
no, I was going to say about the trusted leadership process and coaching is I find those constant conversations, it's almost like forced reflection, right?
Yeah.
And it's something that doesn't seem to happen naturally for whatever reason. People don't kind of sit back and reflect on, like, how am I doing? Like, how am I doing as it relates to this particular behavior, or how to have healthy conflict, or whatever those topics are. So kind of, forcing that conversation in a productive way can be really constructive in terms of how it does slow people down, and it has people reflect on where they're at and what they're doing, how they're doing it. And I think that's, where good habit creation can be born, right?
Oh, 100%.
Because we just got new knowledge, and we have a contained conversation on that topic, and especially if it's done on a weekly or biweekly basis. So yeah, that's really interesting. So, and people can find that on your website.
Yeah, and I'll send you the link if you want to send it out. But yeah. It's on our website, Howatt HR, under resources, on where the infographics are.
Okay.
At the bottom, there's 3 bundles. 1 bundle on trusted, 1 bundle for leaders, and 1 bundle on daily habits for mental fitness. Because there's a lot of folks don't know where to start. So this little starter kit has some videos, etc. It's a free resource we're giving, 6 daily behaviors to get you started to take care of your health.
I really appreciate what you said, Dr. Bell, around having the energy to be a leader and to be in those positions, and how much energy it does take, and the importance of having that self-reflection time to see. I think of, okay, like for myself, what habits am I doing that's actually draining energy? Even what way am I responding to people, or what way am I reacting versus responding that's likely taking more energy, and being able to put up those healthy boundaries within ourselves, because I think that is good leadership. Like you took a step of being an incredible leader by doing that.
Well, here's something, Emily. David, you always ask me these really good questions. So what my big, profound learning in 2024, I can summarize in a sentence, is spending much more time looking at the difference between perception and perspective. Perception is what we think to be true, and spending a lot of time trying to make it right and debate it. Where perspective is being open to the possibility that you have information, but you may not have all the information. And as I start to watch people really blossom, like watching people that, I've had the privilege of, I was thinking about one of my clients, actually one of my coaching clients, and David knows this, and I think some people are good at this and some people are not good. But I've seen for my coaching practice over the years, not take on 2 or 3 very senior people a year, I normally get sent to me because they're, about ready to go out the door. Have a very, very high tacit knowledge, very, very skilled. You're just a little bit rough around the edges. You know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. And so my personality, I do pretty good with people rough around the edges. So my skills is to deal with people that are kind of problematic by times, I guess. Maybe takes one to know one, but I just have that kind of skill set with this population. Well, one of the things that's been really, really cool is watching somebody realize something this simple. This simple is just they engaging in behaviors with their direct reports that they wouldn't actually do the same behaviors with their peer or their CEO. And what really got a few of the clients that I've been working with really recently is when they are asked a good question around, why is it they value their senior leadership more than they value their direct reports? Because it's not a competency issue, it's a choice issue many times. And get them to sit in that perception that when people look at them from the perspective is they don't value their direct reports. They're managing up and they only care about their own hide. And when people can start to become mindful, and what coaching I think does in a way that creates space of, anonymity, confidentiality, you have some energy, coaches can kind of feel, it's now a good time for us to have this conversation and you can pace it. And the way I'm using it specifically in this context, if you want to create a psychological safe workplace, you'll never have inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, or accommodation without that. If you want to remove fear and drive accountability and drive learning, and you want to be able to do that among a group of employees, they need to have a role model, a leader who creates space and it's okay to realize that everything's not going to be honey and roses and there's going to be stress. And it's not what's happening that's the challenge in leadership. It's what we do. It's how we do it. So often leaders confuse the what with the how. And if you can get leaders to pay attention of how they show up or how employees show up, and to realize the one powerful thing I've learned about perspective is I'll often get my leaders say, let's hold our breath for a minute. And they'll go, what? Let's do this. And if you have a heart condition, let's skip it. But let's try to hold our breath for a minute. And I say, let's do it. I start the stopwatch. We're just on the screen. And I go, and I'm just staring at them. And then we go through it, and they sometimes can and can't do it. And does that feel like a long time? Yeah. You know what? If you could save 5 of those 1 minute a day for your employees, you realize how much good you could do. Because that will save those 5 1 minutes. A lot can happen in 1 minute. You're always going to have a lot to do. You're always going to be in a rush. But if you can bank the energy to give people space, a lot can happen in 1 minute for a person to feel valued and heard. And the coaches that can get people to change their perception, that can change their perspective, can help remove fear, where it's okay for people to say, I don't feel comfortable. And what happens with many times, it also for leaders to say, well, I don't feel comfortable with those behaviors either. So it can get that yin and the yang. So that's what I'm trying to do more. And that's really, David, one of the reasons with coaching, with my clients now, with Spencer and a couple of my other folks, I'm actively talking more now about coaching. Not that I never really didn't see value in it, but I'm seeing it as a way to scale trusted leadership. Here's a toolkit, go get a coach and go practice now for the next couple of years. If you do it for a couple of years, you could be really good at this if you want to be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it only takes, you used to be a phys ed person, David. How long does it take to lose 30 pounds? Oh, about a year. Do it right. How long does it take to actually get to the point where people feel comfortable with you and believe you're an authentic leader? Oh, about a year. There's no shortcuts. That's what I'm learning.
Yeah. Yeah. The you speaking about the treating people, well, I guess it's the golden rule of this treat others as they want to be treated, when it's, or as you treat others as you want to be treated, or do
Well,
unto others, whatever that is.
I'll challenge you. That's the golden rule. Let's
Yeah.
the platinum rule. Treat others, do unto others as they would want to be done unto them.
100%. Yep. That's what I was getting at, of how it is. Cause I hear it so often from people of, well, this is how I would want to be treated, or I'm just treating them what I would want. And it's like, okay, why is there so many I's in that sentence? Yeah. Dr. Bill, as always, this has been phenomenal. Thank you so much for your time. This is a podcast, an episode that I will definitely, I mean, I re-listen to all of them because there's so much goodness in them. But I feel like this is one that I and listeners could listen to about 10 times over and still be gaining knowledge from. So thank you so much for coming on here. And
just before we do our extra here, I know we're at the top of the hour here, but I just do want to comment on Bill's energy. He has a remarkable amount of energy, and my best story, well, one of many stories, but the one I'm probably allowed to share when I call him on a Sunday, and I'm just trying to get over the week and relax, and I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, I'm working on a procrastination scale because I realized I don't have I have a point of view, but I haven't really tested it yet." And I'm thinking, man, I feel lazy right now. So the man has a ton of energy, and I think you have a very good point, Emily. It's one of those things we got to listen to again. There's a lot of information packed into it. And thanks, Bill, for coming on. So nice to see you, buddy.
All right, let's chat soon, Dave. Take care, everybody.
yes. So we will list all of Dr. Bill's information and any extras we discussed in the show notes. And the best place to find that is on our website. We're active on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. And the video version is going to be available on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, the podcast is available on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Dave, always a pleasure.
Good seeing you. Take care.
Bye. Thank you for listening. Follow or subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, or visit boilingpointpodcast.com for more.